Hi, what about insomnia then? Well, hello, bonjour, ciao, howdy and glasnost. It's been a couple of weeks since my last rant, and this is beginning to seem like a weekly confessional. I have sinned, but not to the extent of the hierarchy in the no camp. I couldn't believe a grown-up politician could come away with such drivel. The vile comments of like it or not, a traitor. Here he is, the nationalists attempt to bully broadcasters and boycott businesses, and more Scots are looking at their angry and divisive campaign and finding it a turn-off. Well, you weren't there. We were there yesterday at the BBC, biased BBC, peaceful protest. It was fantastic. Mr. Murphy, you missed the lot of it. With only self-interest at the centre of his comments, to demonise a genuine grassroots movement shows how high the mighty have fallen. Well, Jim Murphy, your days are numbered, and the people of Scotland will answer your comments. My advice is prepare for your demise. 80 days and 15 hours notice is hereby given. Now the rest of the words in this rant today is coming from a guy called Tom Steele. Fantastic wording. He asked the question, Scottish independence, who do you trust? There are many questions regarding the pros and cons of the yes or no vote in the referendum on Scotland's independence. As you have witnessed from the very positive and aspirational yes campaign to the very bitter and very negative Better Together campaign, it is fair to say both sides are producing a lot of information to back up their own positions. And this, understandably, is causing confusion for a small percentage of the population. I have listened to and observed the pro-union arguments for more than 30 years, and the rhetoric has been pretty much the same over the past 3 decades, although it has to be highlighted that the current scaremongering, fearmongering has been particularly vile and riddled with deceitfulness. It is uniquely odd, I'm sure you would agree, that the Unionists in the current Better Together and No Borders camps, when asked the question, can Scotland be a successful independent country, they all answer with one resounding voice, yes. Yes, Scotland can be a successful country. But then they had to falsely add the proviso, you're still better off being rolled over by a Westminster Parliament in another country occupied by 500 plus millionaires. Personally, I feel this answer and its ilk utterly ridiculous, intellectually bankrupt and patronising to the people of this nation. In truth, there can be no definitive answer to some of the questions you may pose, because they pertain to the future. And in 5,000 years of human civilization, nobody has managed to predict the future with any degree of certainty or accuracy. However, my purpose is not to bamboozle you with even more information that you probably heard 1,000 times and will hear 1,000 times more before the September 18th. For me, the question on independence is very simple once you wade through all the rhetoric. Who do you trust? Do you trust a Westminster Parliament that for 307 years has undermined Scotland and its people at every opportunity? As historic facts prove, the Macron report being one example of many in recent history. Do you trust a Westminster government that has decimated most of Scotland's steel, coal, shipbuilding and manufacturing infrastructure and industries? Do you trust a Westminster government that sends your kids and my kids to be killed and maimed in illegal wars for the benefit of who? Big corporations and bankers who fund both sides. Do you trust a Westminster government that imposes austerity on the people whilst enabling London to be home for the majority of the world's billionaires, aided and abetted by the crooked bankers and their political cronies? Do you trust the words of the Westminster political elite belittling you, your family, your friends and your fellow citizens, whilst also decrying Scotland as a subsidy junkie? Do you trust the politicians of Westminster that have frivolously burdened our country with massive debts to the tune of £1.4 billion and counting? Or that our great-great-great-grandchildren are still going to be paying off, and in reality will be reduced to nothing more than bonded debt slaves, with servitude and serfdom upon them? Do you trust a Westminster government that the Scottish people did not vote for, leaving our voices unheard, our hopes and our dreams quashed by successive Tory and Labour governments? Do you trust a Westminster government to hold bankers, criminal bankers and tax-avoiding corporations to account, when most of the MPs have directorships and jobs lined up with the same entities? Do you trust a government that for decades has stolen and squandered Scotland's natural resources for the benefit of whom? London and the South East. Do you trust the empty promises and rhetoric of Westminster politicians before elections, but are always broken the day after they're elected, especially when it relates to Scotland? Do you trust a Westminster government that dumps its complete nuclear arsenal 25 miles from Scotland's largest city, but safely 400 miles from London? Never again, Scotland. Never again. There is an alternative. Do you trust an independent Scottish government consisting of locally based MPs that you voted for to do what's right for this country and the hopes and aspirations of its people? Do you trust an independent Scottish government to be prudent? Yes, that word, prudent. Who used that now? Was it George Bryn, George Osborne Bryn, George Gordon Osborne Bryn? One of them anyway. And would they build a wealth fund to create safeguard for all of our people in Scotland through the difficult times? Do you trust an independent Scottish government to inflict austerity on our poorest people, whilst rewarding its richest by corruption and crony capitalism? Just last week, Prince Charles got a £238,000 tax rebate because they changed the 50% to 45%. Doesn't get enough of us, we need a wee bit of pocket money. Do you trust an independent Scottish government to invest in rebuilding our country, creating tens of thousands of jobs and eradicating poverty and premature death? Do you trust an independent Scottish government to protect our National Health Service and our water from privatisation? Do you trust the independent Scottish government that would remove and ban forever the dumping of weapons of mass destruction on our shores? Do you trust an independent Scottish government whose cabinet goes around the country and holds open meetings, public meetings, in their town halls and their community centres, and answers questions directly for the people? Do you trust your friends, your family, and all other people who live and work in Scotland to make the right decisions that benefit our whole society, not just the very privileged few? Do you trust your fellow citizens to promote a caring and inclusive society for our pensioners who help build this country, for our children and grandchildren to grow up in, and allowing them to follow their dreams and aspirations? Do you trust an independent Scottish Government that is transparent about expenses claims and have no need for second homes or moat cleaning for their castles? Do you trust a government chosen by the people, for the people, that 5 million of us can hold accountable at every turn, that we can dispose of easily at a general election without fear or favour, that we will have to suffer a government nobody voted for? Do you trust an independent Scottish Government to maximise the benefits of Scotland's natural resources for the good of all her citizens? Lastly, but not least, do you trust your own God-given common sense? If like me, you do, then there can only be one answer on September 18th, and it is a no-brainer. The people from these shores help build this world. We can utilise that same ingenuity, innovation and inventiveness to build our own country. Vote yes and unleash that true positive potential for all of the people of Scotland. We have on September 18th 15 hours to release that potential. For 15 hours we, the Scottish people, will be sovereign. We, the Scottish people, will have our destiny in our hands. I'm proud that we've achieved this much. Now we're on the cusp. The question I must ask you is, are you with me?